Hello, students. We are going to go through the answer key for Chapter 1, Section 1. So go ahead and get your reading guide out. Please pause the video. Once everyone has their reading guide, go ahead and play the video. Thanks. All right, so we have our answer key here. As you can see, my answers are in orange, so please follow along. Number 1, for the reading guide, you should have had that location. And as you remember, the chapter started off with location, 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 right? Location might be the most important thing that determined the success of civilizations. Number 2, did the geography of the areas that civilizations chose to live make them either more or less successful? All right, so you filled in the blank with these. Number 3, did the environment of the areas have a huge impact on the way those people lived? Those are two very thought provoking questions that we will continue to analyze and discuss throughout this chapter. Number 4, one thing you will notice is that huge civilizations nearly always started near water. All right, and that is very important to remember, really to remember the rest of your life, is that people need water, okay? Specifically, moving water, specifically, big bodies of water, and we will continue learning about that as well. Number 5, list 4 examples of how living next to water is beneficial. You should have had irrigation for crops, provide clean drinking water, used for trade. And then the fourth one was tricky, it is travel. If you thought of another example as your 4, that is fine as well, okay? Number 6, list the pros and cons of a civilization being isolated versus a civilization being accessible. So I divided this into two points. So isolated, the pros are protected from war. The con is trade was difficult. And your examples for being isolated, a civilization that is isolated is Egypt and China. A civilization that is accessible, the pros were they could easily trade, and con more often attacked. And the example of a civilization for that was Mesopotamia. Number 7, early civilizations began in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Number 8, before civilizations could really begin, they needed a stable food supply. And we talked about the agricultural revolution last chapter. I know it was quite a while ago now, but remember we talked about how once civilizations learned how to mass produce food, they were able to grow because more people could live in a smaller area, in a more condensed area. So now let's look at the 7 characteristics of a civilization. Once civilizations understood and had the advancement of stable food supply, so they had agriculture and they had more food that was being grown in a smaller area. Pastoralism, remember that? Once they figured that out, then there was these 7 things that describe each civilization. What did they all have in common? So first was the development of cities. And you do not need to copy this word for word. Whatever you have, please make sure that it aligns with what I have. But if you don't have everything completely similar, that's okay. If you want to add all this information, however, that's fine. This video is posted for you on the lesson. So, for development of cities, once farming and irrigation transformed and were advanced enough to supply food to larger groups of people, settlements began. This was important because it allowed people to have different jobs and specialize in other things. Government and law. The more people that live close together, the more problems there are. This made government and law important. The government figured out how to take care of sanitation problems, making decisions for the settlement, and keeping order. The laws were meant to protect and benefit the society as a whole. And as you continue in your schooling and as you go into 8th grade next year, and we look at the US and how the United States government was established, you will really dive into and study government and law because it is very important to understand why we have government and why we have law, and what are problems that takes care of, and then what are problems that stem from it as well. And obviously, You guys are learning a lot about that this year as well. So, that's an important one to know for civilizations. System of writing. Writing was very important to keep track of money and how things were bought and sold. Governments wrote down laws of the society. So I think often, if you're me anyway, I think of writing as, oh, people needed to know how to communicate with each other. Or, Susie was wanting to send a letter to her grandma, but because they didn't have cars or anything, they had to write letters. And I think of writing as kind of this hobby, but really the system of writing was developed so that people could keep track of very important things like selling land to each other, selling goods, trading with other civilizations. It was essential for money, right? And governments as well. They needed to write down laws. They needed to keep records of what was happening. And that's how we know a lot about history today is from written records in government papers and tax forms and all these things. Like that's what historians study when they're learning about people. So that's a good one as well. They're all good. Let's be honest. They're all important. Specialization. So this is when people became really good at a specific job. So you can see the word specific in specialization there. Examples in early civilizations would be priests, soldiers, blacksmiths, and artists. Everyone contributed to the settlement in these different ways as long as there were others who specialized in providing food for the settlement. That's important to note. So you couldn't have a settlement full of priests, and you couldn't have a settlement full of soldiers. You couldn't have a settlement full of artists, right? We needed people to grow the food, people to build things like the blacksmiths, they worked with metal. We needed people to protect the soldiers, right? Social system. The social system is also thought of as different classes of people. You can picture a triangle with the king or the most powerful person, that's the person that has the most money, on top. There were different classes of people. Some were wealthy, some were poor, some were leaders, some were followers. That was in your book. Complex technology. The complex technologies of the ancient times are astounding because we still use them every single day. So when we think of technology, we think of smartphones, we think of computers, laptops, TVs. But something that's important to understand is we've only had those technological advancements for the last maybe 30 years, okay? And as we've studied, the earth and human existence is extremely longer than the last 30 years. So technology doesn't necessarily mean, computer chips or electricity. Technology are advancements like wells, where they've literally dug down so deep in the ground that they found fresh water. That's incredible. That changes the way you live. That changes where you can go. Plows, that was part of the agriculture revolution. Wheels, we still use wheels in literally everything. You use a wheel for your car, you use a wheel for kitchen utensils and tools, a pizza cutter is a wheel, everything is a wheel. Arches, that's part of building structures. Bridges, we can cross water now. People in Grand Haven couldn't get to, North Shore Beach without that bridge. And then other architectural phenomena like the Great Pyramids. The Great Pyramids are, I don't even know if we could build those today, how they did back then. It's crazy. Organized religion is the last one here, and all civilizations worshipped gods and had organized religion. You can study the different sacrifices that they made. There's a lot of different cave art that shows this, and we've studied that. Many gods had stories and narratives, as well as specific powers that the civilizations worshipped. The most popular would probably be like the Greek gods or Roman gods. This not only brought people together, but also divided nations as well. All right. The organized religion was often the identity of the civilization. All right. And now you have your unit vocabulary. So please look over these vocab words, the definitions, and your Quizlet is at the bottom there. You guys should have done this yesterday in class, which is awesome. If you didn't get to it, that's okay. It's always going to be here on your reading guide for you to use as a study guide for the test. All right, awesome. Thank you very much, guys. And let me know if you have any questions.